You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Happy Tuesday, folks. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair, the inimitable Michael Liebowitz.
I'm imitable.
Inimitable.
No, I'm imitable.
And you are? Why?
I
By whom? Who could?
You could. You're an actor.
Well, that's true. I could, but it wouldn't be you. It would be.
It never is. Whenever you imitate, it's never.
No, that's not true. There are guys who do such great imitations. You swear you are looking at they transform literally. I don't think maybe I'm just selling myself short. Maybe I could. Michael, tell us what's going on with the rational alternative, man.
All right. So I woke up last night at 11 p.m. Fit to be tied with a lot of things. So what we're going to be doing going forward, channel's going to remain the rational alternative. The Capitalist Corner will remain the flagship show. I'm going to be winding down the Rational Egoist, and I will be starting to do Rational Egoist type interviews on this channel. We are still going to be doing every Saturday the Capitalist Corner weekend, and on Sundays, members only program at 11 a.m. And hopefully in the future, we'll be incorporating new shows. I think that the change in the channel name combined with introducing new shows prematurely has helped a decline in viewership. So just to, full disclosure. And I think that we can get it back if we have some consistency and a plan. And so I came up with a plan, and now we're going to implement it.
And we will see what happens, Michael. There could be a lot of factors involved in that. We are principled guys, and we don't go with necessarily what we think the mob wants us to go with. They may accidentally go along with us, but we don't go along with the trends. So that could be part of the problem too. I mean, when you look at viewership growing for the Candace Owens of the world and the Tucker Carlsons of the world, these absolute freaking nuts who appeal to a certain passionate base. And I wonder at guys like Yaron Brook, who's been doing this for years upon years upon years and is still on the fringes of the podcast world. It seems like reason is the last thing people want to embrace.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying. I just think that sometimes where there's a will, there's a way, and I think that there's enough people out there that are rational but are not the sort of button-up types that like a little bit of humor in their lives. And I think that you and I deliver good analysis combined with humor and some very I think we have a real person vibe. Right. I think the two of us do. And I think that's good. And I think that, we're learning. You're a boomer and I'm an ex-con. And so
I am not a boomer.
You're boomer adjacent. You're boomer adjacent.
Yes.
So, we've got to learn this stuff as we go along, but we will. Please remember, folks. Oh, and by the way, tonight I should be getting a new microphone. I'm going to go hunting for a new mic anyway.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll find one and I'll get a nice new one.
How do you exactly trap a new microphone? Since you're going hunting, what kind of instrument do you use to trap that microphone?
Just these, baby.
Just mano, just your hands, man. That's it.
Mis manos, yeah. So just as a reminder too, super chats, super stickers, greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. And again, if you're joining us from X, the channel is The Rational Alternative, available on YouTube. The show is The Capitalist Corner. And Mark is usually here except for when he abandons me.
Yes, but I abandon you for good cause, which is, the betterment of my life and, the furtherment of my professional life. So I had to abandon you to go to the dark continent, to teach for my wife, to do about 5 cons. I do have that part of my life. There's a part of my life that exists without you. I know that's hard for people to believe because we're partners.
Life partners,
Life
heterosexual
partner.
life partners. Yeah.
That's what I was trying. I was looking. I was searching for the phrase. I couldn't remember the phrase. Heterosexual life partners. Man, there's so much going on, Michael. It's just so fucking disturbing on so many levels, and it's so easy to get discouraged when you see diplomacy fails, like we're seeing in the Trump administration. Particularly after there's such a long history with respect to the country we're dealing with now of diplomatic fails. Iran has a long history of using the diplomatic process to consolidate its forces, to progress its ideology, but never to give in. And that's probably one of the strongest points of Iran, is it's the only morally consistent actor in this fight. Go ahead. What? You want to say something? Am I saying something wrong?
I kind of do. I do. No, it's not that you said something wrong. I think that as we're talking about the brand that you and I, want to put out there, I think that accuracy is vital. And this morning, I actually, because I've always been told how dishonest Iran is in its negotiations, and I hear the points that's made. So I wanted to find out for myself. So I did a lot of reading on this morning about their history, and you could tell me where you think I've gone wrong, or if you think.
Well, I've read all of this research because you sent it to me, so I'm doing the preamble with a full awareness,
right,
that you fact checked all this stuff.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So initially, I asked about the Iran's history of maintaining clear, fidelity to the agreements it makes in negotiations. And I asked this to one of the AI systems, and that AI system told me that's not a good question, basically. It says you need to frame it differently, but I'll get to that in a second. So the things I like to be careful about is saying, for instance, well, Iran violated the JCPOA, the agreement that they made with Obama. That's debatable, right? It's not a defense of Iran, but they didn't start violating it until Trump backed out of it, right? So we have to acknowledge that's true. There's also other...
Can we just stop there for 2 seconds, and can I address that?
No. Yes, of course. You can do whatever you want.
Is it possible? Now, of course, this is forcing us into the area of conjecture, and I know you don't necessarily like that. But is it possible that they used the withdrawal of the Americans as a pretext or a pretense? Okay, to break the law. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, of course. All I want to do right now, before we can really get to what my analysis is just put out the facts.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a fact that they did not back out until Trump backed out. They didn't start violating it. That's a fact. So prior to that, there have been various agreements, and I can't remember the names of them, where there were disagreements about legal stuff, right? Where you can say, oh, look, they violated it. But there were disagreements about what the law actually meant. That goes back a while. There's also clear instances of them being very sneaky, right? So I also asked, when juxtaposed with NATO, how, because the AI said all countries are accused of violating agreements. So I said, well, how does it compare to the NATO countries? And not well when it comes to sticking to agreements. Ultimately, my takeaway, right? And again, I mean, this is just from reading this morning. I'm not an expert on this subject. I don't claim to be, but I can read and I can come to conclusions. And I have been seeing Iran in the news since I was a child, right? So it seems to me that what happens is they're kind of sneaky, the Iranians. Maybe the word opportunist is better. They kind of look for loopholes in the agreements that they make, ways to get out of it. And if you don't have a firm eye, basically, on everything they're doing, they will slip out of what they've agreed to. That's what it seems to me. Now, that doesn't mean that they've never stuck to a deal, right? But it also means that they're not a trustworthy group of folks. So now back to your question. Is it possible in regards to the JCPOA that they were looking for an escape route? Of course. But the bottom line is when there were inspectors going in there, which was part of the deal, they were complying. So now the reason that this becomes issue is because J.D. Vance came out and said they've agreed that they're going to allow inspectors. They came out and said, oh, no, we haven't. Now, under most circumstances in throughout my life, if there was an instance between an American vice president and the Iranians making statements about something, I would believe Americans. However, they lied about what was going to be in the memorandum of understanding. They lashed out at critics before it came out. They said, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. This stuff isn't in it. But of course, this stuff was in it. J.D. Vance in the past has made statements about Haitians eating pets and shit, and so has Trump. And that's just the beginning of the lies that they tell about an abundance of things. So there's two main problems that I have with this. One, negotiating with the Iranians to begin with is not wise because they have shown themselves to be not trustworthy unless you're going to have eyes on them at all times. Secondly, you can't believe anything that comes out of this administration, which was one of the worries that I had at the beginning, was that we could never get accurate information about how the war was progressing. That said, now I want to read Phil's comment and then turn it over to you. Okay. Since commencement as regime, the current theocracy in Iran are not entitled to any form of diplomacy other than destruction, period.
I agree with you, Phil.
That's fair.
Agree. I agree. Yeah, one of the worst aspects of this negotiating process is, Michael, is the fact that they've tied Lebanon and territorial integrity, the concept of territorial integrity and sovereignty, into this deal.
Yes.
Now, we know that the metaphysical existence of Israel is dependent upon them basically neutering Hezbollah in the north and in the south of Lebanon. There's no other alternative for them. But to claim that the concept of territorial integrity and sovereignty is being maintained by Iran is just a perversion of what those concepts mean, given the fact that Hezbollah is an independent government with its own military functioning in the south that threatens not only the existence of Israel, but of Lebanon itself. Right. The army of Lebanon is not powerful enough to take out Hezbollah. And it actually appeals to the United States and appeals to at least certain factions of the Lebanese government, appeals to Israel to help them because the Lebanese government cannot help them. They're literally held hostage by these terrorists. And so it's a bad faith ideal from the get-go. And any president that would agree to it, especially with respect to those terms, is out of his fucking mind. Yeah. So you're right. We can't trust Vance. We can't trust the Iranians. We can't trust anybody in there to tell us what's happening. Nor can we trust that there isn't going to be some kind of legalese disagreement down the line with respect to what enrichment means, what dilution of the enriched material means. Right. All of that stuff is going to be fought over. Every period, question mark, dotted I, and crossed T is going to be a point of contention.
Right. So while not attacking, Israel not attacking Hezbollah is part of the agreement, Iran not funding proxy terror networks is not.
Is not.
So, Phil said something here. He says, I read it already. Since commencement as a regime, the current theocracy in Iran are not entitled to any form of diplomacy other than destruction, period. I agree, but I don't know that that's the correct way to look at it. I don't think that you deal and you say, what are they entitled to? I think you say, what is in our best interest, right? And if it were in our best interest to negotiate with them, I really don't give a rat's rear end what they're entitled to. The point is, I don't think it is in our interest. I don't think it was in our interest to violate the Constitution. I don't think it was in our interest to fight this war the way we have. And I don't think it's in our interest to be negotiating based on this already very screwed memorandum of understanding. But it is, it's so ridiculous how badly it seems, right? There's a lot we don't know. So all I can go by is what seems. So when people will say to me, like, for instance, the other day we were talking about on a show, not with you, I was interviewing a guy talking about wealth taxes, and we're going to get into that in a minute. And we're relying, obviously, on IRS numbers. That's who has the numbers. And some guy who criticizes, oh, yeah, you probably just trust everything the government says. I said, no, I don't. And he says, look, you're trusting the IRS. I said, actually, I'm not. But what else are you going to go by? Right? I could make up my own thing. Like, this guy has an opinion that the rich aren't paying enough taxes. But if we're going to say we just are not going to trust anything out of the government, we're not going to use it, well, then we have no idea what anybody's doing, because that's what we're going by. And in this situation here, all we can go by is what is out in the open. And what is out in the open, it appears that Iran has performed a masterstroke, right? Because they took a beating. They did not quit. They were tough in what their negotiating tactics have been up to this point. They realize that they have somewhat control over the Strait of Hormuz, and they've come up with a way to start to put a wedge between the United States and Israel, right? That is it. I mean, it's a masterstroke. So I like numbers says, what is the alternative to not negotiating at this point? This is the inherent, and I always go back to Ayn Rand's quote of Napoleon when asked about, what he would do in a given situation, a bad situation in war. And he said, I wouldn't have gotten into that situation. I don't know what the answer is right now. What I do know is that, it's interesting. Friedrich Hayek, in an essay he wrote in the 70s, said, I find myself in the uncomfortable position of being asked how to avoid the consequences of policies I've been warning against for decades. So I've been warning about Trump for over a decade. I warned about what was going to happen when this conflict started. Now that's happening, and I Like Numbers says, well, what's the alternative now? And the fact is, I ultimately don't know. I do know that memorandum of understanding is ridiculous. I do know that we're being lied to by our government over and over and over again. I'm very confident that there's no way to really beat this regime without ground troops and a lot of American casualties. And I also am pretty confident that the American people aren't going to go for it. So we're in a screwed situation. I think there's a better than 50% chance that war will become necessary. And not necessary in the sense that we say, well, they might have ICBMs 10 years from now. Let's preempt that now. But necessary in the sense that they are bullying the world by closing the Straits of Hormuz, funding terror proxies, and engaging in really, really bad behavior that threatens the national security of the United States.
Yeah, Michael, what you just said reminds me of something. Jean-Jacques Machado, my great jiu-jitsu teacher, often does these little Q&As where he'll have the class ask him a question like, what problems are you having from certain positions? And then he'll answer them, right? And there's sometimes questions like where a guy will go, well, what happens if a guy gets my back and he's got a deep, like, rear naked choke in? What do I do? It's just like, and he'll say, well, you shouldn't get into that position in the first place, because the deeper you get into a position, the harder it is, regardless of how good you are, to get out. No, you can be a master and still be in a position where it's so far advanced that getting out of it is impossible. And we're quickly approaching that time, Michael, where the two alternatives that exist for us is to simply walk away and leave things as they are, which is not necessarily a good alternative, or to go all in. I think Iran is pushing us to an all in because they have the Straits of Hormuz now. They didn't have them before, Michael, but now they have negotiated leverage over that area, and the Trump administration has allowed them to have that leverage. They've also started releasing assets. They've started releasing resources to the Iranians, which were not supposed to be released except in kind, except as reciprocal gestures, right? In response to what the Iranian regime is doing. And so far, the Iranian regime hasn't shown any willingness to do anything but return to the status quo, which is inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Commission and people coming in there to look at what they're sort of get eyes on what they're doing, which they'll fuck around with as they always do. Except now, in addition to the status quo, Michael, they have control over the Straits of Hormuz. They could charge tolls now for the Straits of Hormuz. They've got deals in the works, according to the Trump administration, to rebuild Iran, to rebuild them, and to invest in infrastructure in Iran. And as you said, the coup de grace of it all is that they've driven a wedge between the United States and Israel. Literally, it feels like, and I could be wrong about this, the world is anti-Semitic right now. The world is so allied against Israel. Its only ally, seemingly, in the West has been the United States, and this is where Trump boasts that without the United States, Israel would be. It's bullshit, of course. It's grandiose, of course, but in one respect, it's true that we have been the only supporters of Israel, and to drive a wedge between us and them in this time is a frightening prospect. It is a diplomatic coup on the part of the Iranians.
Okay, so I want to address Phil here. Phil says, remember their declared goals. If someone points a gun at you saying they're going to kill you, what is your reasonable response under the law? What's the difference if it's a state? Okay, so if Mark Pellegrino right now says he's going to kill me, I'm not really all that concerned. Mark is on the other side of the country. He can't get to me. I might take steps to make sure that he doesn't get near me. And if I know he's getting close, really ramp up the precautions. If Mark is in front of me with a gun pointed at me, my response would be much different because I would be immediately threatened. I think that Iran was a case of being Mark on the other side of the country. I think they've threatened America for a long time. I think that they've been able to orchestrate attacks against American interests, but those attacks, by and large, have been when the American military has been stationed in the Middle East. So if we didn't have the disastrous, Phil, if we didn't have the disastrous war in Iraq, which unfortunately I supported, so I take responsibility for supporting it, then there wouldn't have been, I think it's 900 American soldiers for the Iranians to kill in Iraq, right? If the United States wasn't operating as the world's police, as a peacekeeping force in Beirut in the 80s, again, they wouldn't have been in the position to get killed. My point isn't that it's okay that they killed Americans because Americans were overseas. My point is that they've never been able to successfully attack us here, right? So I don't know that the war, it can ever... there is a point where a preeminent strike is justified. I'm not saying that that's not the case.
A preemptive strike, you mean?
Yeah. What did I say?
Preeminent.
Yeah, no, preemptive, yeah. I do think they're justified. I don't think we were at the point where it was necessary with Iran. I certainly don't think it was at the point where it was imminent in the sense that it overrides the Constitution, right? So that's what I think. So for Phil said, he said there's a question above here.
Yeah, and it turns out, Michael, I think Bibi Netanyahu.
Oh, okay. So this is what I wanted to hold your Bibi Netanyahu, because he was responding to Akira Felix, I believe. Akira Felix says, I agree theocratic dictatorships have no right to not be destroyed, but I think nothing since 1979 can be used to argue for getting into war with Iran. Okay, so I think Akira is a little sloppy with his language, but I think I take his meaning, and Akira, if I get it wrong, just correct me, and that's fine. I don't think what he's really saying is there's no argument at all for going to war with Iran. I think what he's saying is that when you take all factors into consideration, everything that we know, everything about their nuclear capabilities, everything about the cost of war, everything about the reaction here at home, the price of gas, the reactions overseas, I think in that sense, what he's saying is the case is not conclusive for going to war with Iran. And I'm inclined to agree with that. Not that I couldn't be convinced. I'm not, light years away from that. And I'm not saying that Iran, it wouldn't be justified to go and wipe out the whole regime. I'm saying that the cost of doing so, relative to the benefits of doing so for the United States, I don't think that case has been made with all candor.
And look, Iran has informally declared war on the United States, and formally, if you're listening to many of the fanatical mullahs. In 1979, when they took those hostages and invaded American territory in the embassy, that was an act of war. When they murdered 200 plus servicemen in Beirut, that was an act of war. What was our response each time? And each time it was capitulation and surrender. Even the cowboy Ronald Reagan got out of Beirut. He didn't fight Hezbollah. He didn't turn his forces on Iran. He got out. Likewise, when we were attacked by Saudis, mostly Saudis in September 11th, our response was to go after the secular regime in Iraq after we took out the Taliban for a while. I attribute that to the blindness of a Christian guy like Bush, who had the same kind of blindness as Reagan when he supported the Mujahideen against the atheistic Soviets. You're fighting the wrong. You're not necessarily fighting the wrong guys, but you're certainly allying yourselves with the wrong people. And this, of course, came back to bite us in 9/11. Consequences of real diplomatic myopathy. But we have a record with these fanatics of at once bailing them out, supporting them, and running when their hostility turns on us. This war could have been quite interesting. I think Bibi Netanyahu erred in thinking that because of the Iranian diaspora abroad, that there was a huge monarchist movement over there and a liberal movement over there. And it's probably there. We just don't know how dispersed it is, how effective it is.
I got to be honest.
Go ahead.
Part of my issue too, I don't trust Bibi Netanyahu.
That's justified.
I mean, this is the same guy who promised us that if we went to war with Iraq and got rid of that regime, it'd be a game changer in the Middle East, and yada yada.
Do you think it would? But do you think it would if we didn't have? Let's look at this from another angle. What we did there was we held democracy as a value in and of itself, and this is Bush pushing. He pushed this on them in Gaza as well, saying Hamas has to be a part of the democratic process because democracy is the ideal that we have to emulate, regardless of who they vote in. So, we left a power vacuum there that the Iranians filled and Iranian proxies filled over there, and even democratically elected, because we held the wrong values. If we didn't hold the wrong values, we could very possibly have turned Iraq into a Japan or a Germany. And if we took, I'm positing stuff that is unprovable at this point. But if we took control and understood what values we needed to assert over there and maintain over there, it's quite possible that it could have been different.
I don't know. Right. I don't know. I think that part of that problem is when people, and I've certainly been guilty of this, but not in a long time, is people make recommendations based on what they want to happen. Right. So somebody might say, oh, I supported the Iraq war, but I wanted them to execute it differently, which is true. Right. I didn't want them to go over there to change hearts and minds and be kind and all that shit. I thought that they were going to put somebody in place. The problem is you don't get to do that. Right. So the people who supported this war in that now they're saying, yeah, but I supported it, but I wanted it to go differently. You can say that is fine. The problem is governments fuck up. Right. And when you look at somebody like Trump and what his track record is, and J.D. Vance and what his track record is, there was virtually no way this thing was going to go well, right? But people think that you can just, because in their minds they can conceptually separate things, think they can do it in reality. So if things would have been differently, could have Bibi have been right? I don't know. I know that he knew Bush and he knew what was going on a lot more than I did. And he still supported it and still made these predictions and still made these recommendations.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. Yeah, you have to take in the full context and ask yourself whether or not your wish actually conforms to the facts on the ground. Does it? Are we capable of making that hard choice to send a MacArthur in there and to bring constitutional government and representative republicanism to Iraq? If not, then it's simply not a possibility. I'll give you a personal example, Michael, because I, like you, at first supported the war in Iraq because I read Saddam's Bomb Maker. I read all the stuff coming out that seemingly justified the fact that this guy was a threat. Now, I didn't think it was the right war. I still thought Iran was was a worse threat than Iraq. But nonetheless, I sort of knew what was going on the ground enough that when my friend, straight after 9/11, says, Mark, I want to join the Army. He was right on the cusp. He was like 34 years old, 35, right on that cusp where he could just join the Army. And he wanted to join me. He was inspired by 9/11. He wanted to go fight for his country. I said, all right, I'll be honest with you. I don't think you should. I said, because you will be a pawn in a big political game that has nothing to do with winning this war and taking out Islamic fanatics around the world. It's not going to happen. I said I would sooner fight for the IDF, who is at least clear in their prerogatives and has the survival and life and thriving of the Israeli citizens as their foremost goal, than I would for the U.S. military. And this isn't not an unpatriotic call here. It's just realistic. A military that is in the hands of the political parasites who are completely misinformed and have the wrong ethical concepts guiding all of their choices. But he went against me and ended up enlisting and becoming a master sergeant in the airborne 101st Airborne. And then he went all over Afghanistan, Iraq. He survived. He's got some PTSD as a result of it. But I think he says I was right. And I think I was, because I was looking at all the conditions on the ground and seeing, irrespective of the nobility of our cause, we simply don't have the people at the helm to be able to fulfill it.
Also, the will back here at home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, like people will frequently use World War II as the metaphor. How many Americans died in World War II? Like 250,000 or so?
In there, yeah.
In that ballpark. There are very few circumstances under which the American people are tolerating that kind of death here at home. There's no way they're tolerating what happened with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or the bombing of Dresden, Germany. That's not going to happen. And so when we're advocating for war, we need to factor everything in, take the whole context, and then, make our decisions on what we want and what we don't want. If we want to convince people that a World War II style battle is justified, then that's what we need to do, and convince people that that's, what needs to be done for our own survival. But just, having Trump decide haphazardly that he's going to go to war with Iran, thinking that they're going to be surrendering in 4 to 6 weeks with an unconditional surrender, that's just laughable that was ever going to happen.
I mean, the good news about war technology and the advancement of war technology, Michael, is that we could still wreak an incredible amount of havoc and damage onto a rogue regime and kill a fraction of the population that we did before. Remember, when they dropped bombs on Tokyo and Dresden, they just dropped ordnance. Just straight out of the sky. And it just hit everything. They were dumb bombs. They just dropped, and gravity took over. But now we have the capacity to be much more surgical. So far fewer civilians, I think, would be casualties in a fight like this. As Israel proved, but it proved both your points. It proved, one, you can have a 1-to-1 casualty ratio in an urban fight that normally has a 9-to-1 casualty ratio and still be accused of genocide because a lot of people are dying. Even if the vast majority of those people are considered militia or fighters, even though they're not being listed that way by the enemy, it's still the idea of 40,000 people dying in that area about the size of Manhattan is really daunting to people. They're simply not prepared to deal with those kind of casualty figures anymore.
I'm curious, before we move on to the taxing the rich portion of the program, so Akira Felix says the IDF is not far better. They constantly sacrifice Israelis in favor of Palestinians, and they have military conscription. Jeanette says, no, they do not. They protect Israel with everything in them. I'm assuming she's referencing the first part, because they definitely have military conscription. that's not a debatable thing.
Go ahead. You want to comment? Because I want to comment too after you're done.
Right. I'm inclined to think that Jeanette, are you saying that the Israelis never go soft and sacrifice their own in order to protect the enemy? Because I think it's pretty clear they do.
Yeah, can I jump on that, Michael, and give an example?
Yeah,
But
sure.
but Michael, it's only because the alternative is so
No,
terrible.
no. I'm not. I'm just saying. I'm just saying that it seems like that Akira's statement was fairly accurate.
His statement is they're both accurate in a way because the Israelis do understand that their existential existence depends upon them being very strong and forceful with enemies in a way that you just don't see anymore. However, look, the alternative for Gaza, for example, would have been they could have destroyed Gaza completely and annihilated everything there, including the underground tunnels and infrastructure, and wiped Hamas completely off the face of the earth. But the moral toll in their minds was far worse. Now, I have a disagreement with that. It's very, very difficult moral territory to negotiate. But I certainly think that sending their men in to fight in an urban war, men and women, to fight an urban battle, which is one of the most brutal and horrific ways of fighting, in an attempt to bring civilian casualties on the enemy side down to nearly 1-to-1 status, was a sacrifice of their own soldiers. And it was an attempt to be moral by the standards of altruism, Michael. It was an attempt to show that they valued the enemy equally to their own lives, which, of course, is a moral impossibility. I think if you're a rational egoist, you can't value the enemy's life more than your own or as equal to your
But
own.
I don't think that's an accurate way to put it, Mark.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I don't think that if I don't think that they are saying we're going to identify our enemies' lives as equal with their own. I think that they're discriminating in saying that Palestinian civilians, either they're doing it for pragmatic reasons or they're doing it because they believe it. They're saying that Palestinian civilians are not all our enemy. We want to actually kill the enemy. So I don't think, for instance, that they're putting Hamas on an equal footing with themselves or with their own lives. I don't, however, think that they should be sacrificing their lives even for, the innocent Palestinians. And I've over and over said, I have over and over again said that if you can accomplish your goals without, causing civilian harm, you should, but only if you can. Right. So I think that that's actually what's happening there.
And that's sort of what I was implying. It's not that they're holding Hamas as equal, but the Palestinian citizen is equal. And you simply can't. I mean, and that's especially when the enemy is so thoroughly embedded in the Palestinian population as to be almost indistinguishable. And especially in such a thoroughly indoctrinated culture. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who want this Hamas regime done. They certainly are. There certainly are. Many of them, of course, are killed in purges. Many of them were killed during the ceasefire. And many of these brave people actually come out on social media and express themselves. And those people are unbelievably courageous given the violence that they are subjected to and that they know they'll be subjected to if the good guys don't win. But nonetheless, the Israeli citizen can't hold the Palestinian quote unquote citizen as an equal to himself. He simply can't.
Yeah.
And the fact that they do is why a couple of hundred IDF soldiers.
They shouldn't. But Akira Felix says, why is a Palestinian more valuable than an Israeli soldier that was forced into war? But I don't know who he's asking that to because I didn't imply that. My whole point was that it's not that they're treating the enemy as equal. They're treating civilians as equal, but that's a mistake. That was my point.
Given the circumstances, Akira, of an emergency, the goal of the defenders should be to end it as soon as possible.
I don't know what Jeanette's talking about. I can't.
What did Jeanette say?
She just says they are not. But Jeanette, you have to understand that we're talking, and your comment doesn't come until far after what we've said. So when you put a comment, you have to be more specific than they are not, because that doesn't really.
Yeah, Akira says Israel's been called the most moral army in the world because they don't have casualties. That's suicide. That's the opposite of protecting its own people. Look, I mean, the fact that they have It is sort of right, Michael, in that but the most moral army in the world, you have to ask yourself by what standard of morality, and certainly
Right.
by the dominant standard of morality today, they are. By sacrificing their own well-being, they are saying to the world, look what we are willing to do to prove to you that we are moral. And it's certainly, even though they have as a contradictory standard their own survival, and their own survival would dictate that they have to get this war completed as quickly as possible with as few Israeli casualties as possible, which doesn't mean going in there and fighting house to fucking house. It means something else.
So Jeanette says they are not the Palestinians. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jeanette. I don't know what the Palestinians are not, so I can't really address it, although I would like to. Taxing the rich, right?
Dude, I'm so fucking bored with that statement. I hate that now when I hear this.
Okay, either way, but I think that getting taxed is actually worse than hearing about it. But
that's true.
Or
hearing that you have to pay your fair share. If another politician says that, I want to choke them out.
Well, one of the articles actually said they say that because it has no meaning. What the hell is fair share? What does it even mean? What are you talking about? But the rich in America actually pay more than the rich in other countries. Our income tax code is far more progressive than most other countries. But it doesn't actually pay for what they're claiming they want, so it doesn't accomplish that. But the idea that the rich should be paying more has a rich, no pun intended, or maybe it was, history. Going back to Athens, in ancient Greece, they wanted the rich to pay more for the military. And if you notice throughout the history of this thing, oftentimes it's to pay for war, right? That's when the Civil War in America, they wanted the rich to pay more because to fund the war, or welfare programs, as with the New Deal. But one of the most, so Adam Smith actually recommended a progressive tax, which I thought was ridiculous. The French revolutionaries kind of wanted it, but even they really didn't accomplish it. It was liberal Britain that first really put this thing, across as far as the modern West goes. I think that there's a few reasons that people favor this. I think they think it's economically viable. A lot of them. I think that they think that it's necessary. I think some people buy the idea that the rich are not paying taxes. But a lot of it is just hatred of the rich. I mean, you can see it in the way people speak. Like Elizabeth Warren saying, "Oh, we're not going to be worried about the tears of billionaires," or some such ridiculous thing like that. It's just, okay, Elizabeth Warren, you're worth $12 million according to what I saw today. I'm worth about $1,000. So so should I be concerned about your tears? Why aren't you funding me? Interesting. Stephen Hicks put a post out today on Facebook that had me laughing my ass off. He said, "My neighbor gets laid a lot." He says, "My neighbor is getting laid all the time." He said, "Me, not so much." He said, "I think that a politician somewhere should step in and, equalize this situation so that I'm getting laid, as much as my neighbor." And I mean, it's funny, but it tells the truth is that you want the government to equalize outcomes because in large part people are envious, and it's gross, and that's why we are here.
Yeah, and what's so funny, Michael, is that it comes under the banner of justice. But when you have unequal energies, unequal intelligence, unequal capabilities, unequal talents, well, expect those to be rewarded accordingly. Justice, in part, is rewarding accordingly. And so when you're claiming that, the Marxist dictum of from each according to his ability to each according to his need is the new maxim that we have to follow in society, you are asking for injustice, for the institutionalization of injustice. And what I found particularly disturbing about this article, Michael, was this statistic. The top 50% of taxpayers pay 97% of the tax. The bottom 50% pay 3% of the tax. Michael, there are millions, tens of millions of people in America right now who pay zero tax. And you know who that isn't? Any billionaire out there. It's not them. And also, one of the things that people seem to think, the Bernie Sanders of the world perpetuate this image that you got Elon Musk with $1 trillion in gold and fucking and cash sitting in some big, huge room somewhere. And he's got his trash can lid. He's sliding down the hills of gold, keeping it to himself. That's not what their wealth is based on. Their wealth is based on stocks that they hold in companies that they have created, which, by the way, people like Elizabeth Warren want to tax. And what kind of horrible message does this send any innovator or any person who wants to start a business? Or, Michael, God forbid, the 62% of people out there who hold stocks in companies themselves and depend on the income from those stocks for their own retirement.
So there was a really good argument, really good article in the Daily Economy today called "From Victimhood to Agency: What's Standing, What Is Up to Understanding What Is Up to Us." I posted this
Great
just
article.
now to Facebook and X. It was great, and it talks about how prisoners, and I've experienced this till you're sick to your stomach. No matter what they've done, it's not their fault. They didn't have agency. It was somebody else. And it says that a lot of people do this, beyond criminals. But those same people ascribe agency to others, right? So I couldn't help it because Mark is such a jerk. All the rotten things Mark does to me, that made me a bad person. I'm assuming Mark could have done something about being a jerk, but that I couldn't. And that is just so spot on. It's actually, in psychology, they have what they call the fundamental attribution error, where people ascribe their own mistakes or bad decisions to external influences, but the bad behavior of others to internal circumstances. And I'm actually going to do a show later on today. I'm going to record for the Rational Egoist an episode about the capitalist personality and how to cultivate it. And a lot of that is having agency, taking responsibility, an internal locus of control, developing a sense of efficacy, of optimism. And I think that if you develop that sort of mindset, it goes a long way towards getting rid of the idea that it's okay to tax, or some people are not paying their fair share or whatever other garbage they put out.
And Michael, Akira hits it right on the nose here. It's a reference to what you're saying. That's too complicated, Mark. I just want the Garden of Eden and the rich to must pay for it. That's exactly it, Michael, and why we advocate for the road less traveled by, right? Because reason requires agency. It requires self-responsibility, the capacity to check yourself, to check your behavior, to understand whether or not what you're doing is wrong, because the object of your mind and your ethics is to navigate the world successfully. That's what it's for. And what we have here is a group of people who simply don't want that responsibility. And I've called it the Eden complex for a long time, Michael, because in the Garden of Eden, whatever creature was there wasn't human. Values just dropped out of the sky, man. He could pick a fruit. He could pick something up out of the ground, eat it. He was immediately provided for at no cost to himself. It was his rational faculty, his egoism, his capacity to understand right from wrong that pushed him out of that garden and made him now how to work for his living, which is considered a curse to most people. And these people have ingested that myth hook, line, and sinker.
When did you ever call it the Eden complex? Did you just come up with that right now?
No, I've called it that for a long time. I might have written a paper about it.
Okay.
I think I wrote about it when I was at OAC.
What the hell is OAC?
Objectivist Academic Center. It's now the Ayn Rand University or something like that.
Oh, you were at the Objectivist Academic Center. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize I was here with one of
I didn't realize. Yes, you did. Don't bust my balls.
The intelligentsia is part of the elite.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay. Now, what the hell was I going to say? Like, for instance, when it comes to equality, I would very much like to have Mark's hair. Instead, I've got this full of colics and gray. So I want the government to step in and do something about it. The government actually did step in and do quite a bit back in the days of the Townshend Acts, though, Mark.
Yeah, let's talk about that because we only have 10 minutes and we got
Yeah.
to get to the Townsend Acts.
Yeah, we do. We have to get to the Townshend Acts. The Townshend Acts were passed after what we talked about yesterday, the Declaratory Act, which said that the bastards over at where are they from there? Oh, Britain could tax. They had more, what's so funny?
So the Declaratory Act, is that what we're talking about?
No, we
Yes.
talked about that yesterday. The Townshend Acts were a series of acts. So this guy over there, now I can't remember his first name, Charles Townshend, advocates for these acts. He dies shortly thereafter. But it taxed goods imported to the American colonies.
By the way, it taxed goods that Townsend thought the colonies could not easily produce on their own.
Right, because they wanted to get into more independence, more production here, so they were going to tax things that they couldn't do.
Right.
So they had the Revenue Act imposed direct taxes on everyday items imported into the colonies, including glass, lead, pepper, paint, and tea. The Suspending Act prohibited the New York Assembly from conducting any further business until they fully complied with the Quartering Act, why we have the Third Amendment. The Indemnity Act lowered commercial duties on tea imported to England by the British East India Company so that it could compete with the Dutch tea in the colonies. And then the Board of Customs Act established strict machinery for customs collection, creating a new Board of Customs. The colonists were quite pissed about this. They ultimately, you had the Daughters of Liberty now. They had the Sons of Liberty before. Now it's the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. Now we have they've got the Daughters of Liberty fighting for this. Ultimately culminates in the Boston Massacre, where you have, the colonists were pissed off. They're protesting all the time. The burning in effigy. I love the burning in effigy. Like, I wish we could bring that back. That sounds like it's a hoot. They're doing that. An apprentice of some sort gets into an argument with one of the British soldiers. They start throwing
in front
snowballs.
of the customs house. In front of the
customs house. They're throwing snowballs at these people. One of them shoots, ends up killing, I think, three or five people. Ironically, the Townshend Acts were repealed on the same day as the Boston Massacre occurred. But this just further incentivizes the colonists, who are already at their wits' end with this shit. They're getting moving. We got the Sons of Liberty. Now we got the Daughters of Liberty. John Adams ends up defending the British soldiers. And then we're going to get to tomorrow. Actually, I want to skip a day of the history of events, and I want to talk about John Dickinson a little bit. I think we're going to do tomorrow. John Dickinson wrote a lot in response to the Townshend Acts. He was a very big voice. And then, a little strange later on, you didn't want to get into the independence, but we're going to talk about him tomorrow. Then, are you going to be here tomorrow?
I'm going to be here tomorrow. I have to leave 5 minutes early for a meeting.
Okay, you're not going to be here Thursday. So when Mark is not here Thursday, I'm going to get into the tea tax, the Boston Tea Party, and the Intolerable Acts. So yeah, we're cooking, and we're going to be doing a lot of this. Like we said over there. Oh, look at this! This is amazing. I just got a text right now from Andy Bernstein.
Nice. So yeah, Michael. Yesterday, when we were talking about the shot that Washington fired the first shots in the French and Indian War, I was talking about an event that happened right after the ambush, but I thought it happened previous to the ambush, which was his Indian scout, actually, after they had ambushed the French company, when they walked up to them to parley, the French commander handed Washington a note that told them that the French had no intention of fighting them, that they weren't there to ambush the British. And while Washington was trying to decipher the French note, his Indian companion said, "I see that you are not dead, my father," and struck him over the head with his tomahawk and washed his hands in his brains.
But you never done that?
No, I never done that, but that's pretty gnarly. And that then that commander happened to be the brother of the commander of that had taken over the fort at the Forks at the Forks there in Pennsylvania, and he was the one that came after Washington after that and was able to surround Fort Necessity and bombard it until they surrendered and humiliated Washington, by the way.
He was just 21 years old. Have you ever read any James Fenimore Cooper by any chance?
Very young. Oh, The Last of the Mohicans?
No, James Fenimore Cooper wasn't The Last of the Mohicans.
No, but he write The Last of the Mohicans?
He did, yeah. He wrote that, Pathfinder, Deer Hunter. Not Deer Hunter. Was it Deer? No, Deer Hunter's the movie. Deer Slayer, I think maybe. Deer Slayer.
Okay, good.
Whatever. Nah, not really, but it just made me think of it when you were talking about the tomahawks. I don't know. Word association. So we have no comments or answers to the question from yesterday. What
was the answer? What was the question yesterday? I posed it, didn't I? Or did I not? Or did you pose it?
Didn't oppose it? What do you mean you opposed
did you pose it? Or did I pose it? I forget.
I think I posed it.
What was it?
I don't remember.
It was a movie question, wasn't it?
No, I think maybe. Book question. Maybe it was a book question. It was a book question. So don't ask a book question today. We're going to do the capitalist thought of the day, though. I want to do it. I've did a little research on something called the capitalist personality. I wanted to know what type of traits made people support capitalism or allowed people to thrive in capitalism. And I can't get into the whole thing right now, but just as an example, last night I woke up 11 p.m. frustrated and aggravated with the way that the channel was going. And in those moments in life, which we all are going to face, we have a choice, right? We can say, and give up, or we can find solutions and move forward. I personally chose to look for solutions and move forward. I think that we need to have that approach to life in general. Always solution oriented, always moving forward, always trying to come up with better ways to live, with better ways to be happy, with better ways to thrive. And I think we need to apply that to all areas of our lives, whether it be in our jobs, in our relationships, or in our advocacy for capitalism. It would be easy to be discouraged by what's going on in the world. It would be easy to say, screw it, I'll just go and frolic around and look at the leaves or whatever else you might want to do. But that is not going to help you, and it's not going to help your country. It's not going to help much of anything. What does help is tenacity, optimism, steel of spine, and that's what we hope you will develop if you don't already have it. If you do already have it, you can still strengthen it. That's what we need to do, and that's the direction we need to head. Now, Mark, let's see if you have better luck with the pregunta for today.
I doubt it. So I was watching the news yesterday, and there was a whole segment about the rise of democratic socialism in America. They have a democratic socialist mayor in New York City who's at this very moment flexing his political muscles over there and attempting to get more democratic socialists elected. So far, he seems to be ahead of the game. There's a democratic socialist mayor in Seattle, and there's one potential for the DC area, which may inspire Trump to federalize the city and make sure that democratic socialist doesn't get in there. That's a whole other ball of wax. But I want to ask you guys if you think democratic socialism is going to really raise its head. Of course, OAC is a top contender in a favorite, one of the favored candidates for the 2028 election. Bernie Sanders, of course, has a massive cult following. Do you think the Democratic Socialists of America are going to gain ascendancy in the next couple of election cycles? Yes or no? I hope no, but I definitely want your feedback on that. And what we as people who want free enterprise, free minds, and free markets can do about that. Because they seem to be cornering the affordability argument and actually doing a fairly successful job at providing answers, which of course are all wrong, but they are nevertheless providing answers that people want to hear.
Yes. Jim Valiant says to check out Mark Twain's send-up of James Fenimore Cooper. He says it's hilarious. It absolutely is. I believe it's called The Literary Sins of James Fenimore Cooper. Mark Twain absolutely hands Mr. Cooper his ass. Okay, Mark.
All right, folks. Well, Akira, I guess I said OAC instead of AOC. I meant AOC. You guys know that. The Objectivist Academic Center is not a Democratic Socialist organization, but AOC is certainly a Democratic Socialist. So I'm going to get on that, folks. I'm going to be checking my premises over the next 23 hours. I hope you're doing the same. Remember, that is the key to us becoming better as human beings. Check your premises. Peace.